young people are smart enough to know they're not going to put their lives on the line if their own government is then going to stab them in the back with legal action. But it's not only legal action being used. Have a look at this one. This was a report from a while ago where the Independent took the lead on warning about the dangers to British Armed Forces, people who were given the anti-malarial drug Lariam. Now, the interesting factor is this drug was banned by American forces. They said it was dangerous, so the Americans are not giving it to any military personnel. Well, many people in the UK have been campaigning for to be stopped here, but of course the Ministry of Defence not listening. But some amazing statistics just out, and as of 10 o'clock this morning, it was only the UK column that was talking about these statistics. So this is the report, and basically, what are they saying? Well, they're saying that 6.9% of those prescribed with Lariam subsequently had an initial assessment for a mental health disorder, and 7.9% of those prescribed other drugs had an assessment for mental health disorder. Now, the report said this: it's not possible from centrally held data to identify whether the mental health episode was associated with being prescribed an anti-malarial drug. That is a fair statement because the people who produce the statistics are not medically qualified to make that connection. But let's use a little bit of common sense from their own statistics. So we've got one of the graphs here. So this is talking about Lariam. And just have a look at the numbers of people we're talking about. 1,200 servicemen and women showing mental health problems after this drug is prescribed. The top line numbers of personnel in each year that have been given the drug. The bottom red line is those having to have some form of mental health assessment. And there's, to me, a clear correlation in those two lines. Let's bring in the larger sample of the other drug, which was given to 99,000 troops. We're now talking about 7,800 troops having problems with mental health issues. So that's a total number there of whatever it is, 9,000. We're talking about 8% suffering problems out of the individuals given this drug. If this was to be a casualty on the battlefield, this would be untenable. 9,000 British casualties, not as a result of action of an enemy in Afghanistan or Libya or Syria even. This is the result of a British government pushing out a dangerous medication on British forces. And of course, they have to accept that medication. We spoke to the MOD media team this morning. I'm going to say they were polite, but I thought a little bit jittery. They said the line is that there's no proven medical relationship between Lariam and other anti-malarial drugs and mental health problems, but they've promised to come back to us with a proper emailed statement in due course.
A couple of weeks ago, and I can't remember which senior military general it was, I believe it was a general, made a public statement about Lariam and criticised it strongly. The Ministry of Defence at the time said, well, it's okay because we've mostly got people off Lariam and onto other drugs now. But the word mostly stood out because if even top military brass are saying we should not be using this, and the MOD is saying, well, we're mostly not using it, what that implies is that they've got a stockpile of the drug sitting there, and they are determined to use it and not throw it in the bin.
That's exactly correct, Mike. And we also know a representative from the company that makes Lariam met with senior military officers and MOD officials. And in that meeting, the company said quite correctly that the Ministry of Defence was not prescribing Lariam in accordance with the guidelines stated on each and every packet. So we might not agree with the drug industry or what it's doing, but if we take pure factual information here, we know that the Ministry of Defence was not prescribing this drug properly. What do? They switch to other drugs, which by these statistics appear even more dangerous. And what are we talking about? We're talking about men and women with access to small arms, to munitions, explosives, very, very dangerous weapons. And of course, people with mental illness are not exactly prime candidates to be in the military. Mark, this has been a big issue for veterans in the States, that there's been a strong push by those who want to get guns away from the American public to make sure that any ex-military people are screened for mental illness. And if there's the slightest whisper of it, they're not going to be entitled to a weapon. There's something very fishy going on here, I think.
Oh, indeed, Brian. That's true, what you said. The mental illness thing is a gateway. If you don't pass the muster, you can have your Second Amendment rights suspended or abolished. But it also goes back to the Gulf War syndrome becoming finally acknowledged by the U.S. government as Gulf War illness. And U.S. soldiers were used as guinea pigs during the earlier days of the War on Terror. They were given different vaccines, many of which were not fully tested to see if they were safe. They were exposed to insecticides to keep the desert fleas away. They were exposed to oil well fires, depleted uranium, radioactive fallout from the munitions that the U.S. uses that are tipped with depleted uranium to penetrate armor, and so on and so forth. And so just like in Britain, the number of casualties and deaths in America from the War on Terror in all the theaters is much, much higher than the official killed in action counts that were given. So it's critical to take note that the real War on Terror has probably taken 100,000 American lives, conservatively speaking, at least 90,000, and we're told figures like Afghanistan 4,000 or 5,000, Iraq 5,000 or 6,000. So these are vastly underreported, vastly suppressed numbers from suicides and from disease and non-battle injury, because all they give us is killed in action figures. And so we are not being told the real toll, we are not being told the real death toll of the War on Terror.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for that. I'm just going to put this slide up because this is the reality of it. We've now got a British Prime Minister, Theresa May. I'm calling her the Jezebel Prime Minister. Seems that the characteristics of Jezebel fit perfectly. But she's leading a government attacking her own people. We can see it with children, the sexualization of children. We've got the breakup of families. We've got even the attack on what our gender is. Industry destroyed, the health service destroyed, morality. And here we're seeing yet another facet of this where they are prepared from the inside to help destroy Britain's own military while using those brave men and women to fight their wars overseas.